so first off, I'm going to show. I just opened this file, and this is what it's how I have it set up. I like to have everything in one working folder. So, like this is my full scale proof, and so I have two different artboards. My first artboard is my actual art at the correct size. My second one is my proof. So my 8.5 by 11 proof that I'm going to export. So I keep them both in here just so everything's in one place. So I'm going to work from this artwork. So I'm going to delete. So I'm deleting everything that I don't need. So I'm just unlocking everything. And then if you hit Shift 0, it takes you to here so that you can manipulate your artboards. If you don't like hitting that, you can also do document setup, edit artboards, or do one of these. I think you do over here. So delete that. Next thing I like to do is make my artboard the size of the substrate, which I'm assuming is going to be a full sheet. So we make the width 48, the height 96. Something I hit a lot is Control 0, which makes it so that everything is, that it shows the entire artboard. So I'm deleting the dimensions because we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to grab all of this, or all the objects together. I just want to perfect one before duplicating it. So I like to double check to make sure that everything's good. I even go into what's called wireframe with Control Y, or you can also just go up into Window and rid of View. Yeah, so you can hit here too. It's also View here, so you turn that on and off through here too. So I like to use keyboard, so there we go. So quickly, when you're in wireframe, you can tell that this is not outlined and this is. So then the easiest thing I can explain is to, well, I switch arrows. You know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to explain what I'm doing. So this is a solid. So I'm going to make these so that they don't have any inserts. Sorry, I'm explaining. That's weird. I'm making it so they don't have any fill. So see how it has no fill? So now within here, I can select only the orange while it's all still grouped, because it doesn't have a fill. She says, okay, you know what? I'm just going to ungroup it and do it that way. So we're going to ungroup all, and we're going to do it step by step. It's grabbing something, I just don't know what and why. Something's attached. Okay. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, so you know how to outline font. That's the next thing I do. I make sure that everything is lined up. And then that's how you know that it wasn't grouped before. So Control Z. Make sure each part is grouped on its own. Group, which you're doing object, group, right there. So then I'm grabbing all three of these, making sure that they're centered. At this point, I can also take all of these, because it doesn't hurt anything to do center align this way. So now I'm going to grab these three, and I'm going to group them. I'm going to also check these holes to make sure that they are centered to an even number. The way I'm doing that is I'm just drawing a shape. I'm going to make that shape an even number just to kind of, looks like it's, we're going to bring them into 16 because they're actually pretty far out there, and I don't know why they're so far out. So I know that my rectangle is 16 even. My holes are going to be, they're always going to be 1/8 inch. So 0.125. And then you can set it to the top of the 16. So see how it's right on there? So we're going 16 to center. So I'm zooming out, zooming back in, and doing the same to this one. We're going to make it so that it's 1/8 inch. And then I'm going to make it so that it is on the at the anchor point, so you can see how it's taken like 1/4 of it, so that's good. For right now, while I'm working on it, this makes me crazy, so I'm going to bring the artboard in, because every time I hit it, it's zooming me out way far, and I don't want that. So, there we go. Okay, so we don't need this anymore, because we now know that they're 16. So we're going to grab both, always group them together, so now these two are part of the same group. So then at this point you can do both centers. You can center, and just look at everything. I stare at it while it shifts, but did you see that, how it like everything shifted slightly? Because I did the center horizontal and then center vertical, and then you see how everything just shifted pretty quick all together. So that's exactly what we want. So this is kind of going out of step, but this is the part where I would pull each part of these to prepare it for the apex before duplicating it. So because I already have a stroke, this is going to be the shape of my sign, right? So let's start by labeling stuff, and this is where we're going to get into layers. So this part right here, so the top layer is always going to be your CCD layer. I'm just going to label all of these for what they need to be. So we're going to need a CCD layer. We're also going to need a mill layer, which is meaning the outside of the sign that's highlighted in green right now. So that's going to be mill, and then we also have to tell Jeremy, or the production person, which this is how you tell them what to do with this line, whether it's going to be inside compensation, outside, or no compensation. So right now for this sign we need outside compensation, so I just type that in here, and then we're going to need, for this case, we're going to need holes. We should put that on a separate layer. If we need to add a layer, you're going to click here, and then I would just drag to this bottom, and this is going to be our artwork layer. Okay, so let's put everything where it belongs. So this guy goes on here, perfect. This is on the wrong layer, but this is like one of my favorite things that I learned not too long ago. So this little green dot, whatever I have selected, I can now drag this little dot to where it needs to go. So now this, if you want to test that it made it to the right layer, you can turn it on and off like that. So I'm just going to turn them off as we go. So holes are there, but we don't see them. Mill is there, but it still has the artwork. So we're going to pull the artwork off of that. So I'm just going to hit select A, or Control A, just to select everything. And then I hit Shift and touched basically what I'm doing is I'm grabbing everything except for the mill layer. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I drag this down. You can also do this another way. So see how they're separate now. There's also another way to do it, so I'll show you that one too. So I have this, it's still in the green layer. You can also just copy, delete, select this layer, and then Control F, and it pastes it too. So whichever you're more comfortable doing. Okay, so now we should have all of our layers. Let me unselect it. Okay, so now everything should have its own, right? So as I turn them off, you'll see that mill disappears, holes disappear, artwork disappears. So test that before we do anything else. So what I like to do for the mill one Oh, and a lot of times, and if you're working on something and you just want them locked, you can also lock them down here in the layers palette just to lock them, so that way now when I go to grab, I'm not grabbing everything. It's the same as like when you're locking the individual things this way, how you lock up here. But this, you're locking per layer, so it's just faster and easier when you're working in layers. Okay, so before I start to like lay everything out on the sheet, I switch my stroke to where it needs to be. And this is actually a good example to show you what I mean by different compensations. So the bit size is 6mm, right? Which actually, oh, with that, no, it doesn't understand because this is points. So I just know that, okay, so to give you an example, 6mm, right? So imagine that this is our bit. Let's just change the color to something else, okay? All right, so this is our bit, and it's going to travel around the outside of the sign, right? So I'm going to make the stroke of the sign go, and then I'm going to explain what it is. So I like to make the stroke 17 points because you'll see that that equals the size of the bit. So if I want, let's start from the one that we used most, which is outside compensation, which is going to be what we do for this job. So I'll show that first, then we'll work our way in. So I'm going to grab the stroke and make it, and like, so the stroke you can do to kind of show you to visualize. This is what helps me prep files outside, right? So I'm taking my stroke, I'm putting it outside. So then the bit is going to follow that line. So this is outside compensation. So if you want a sign to be exactly 18 by 12, you need to build the file like this, so that the stroke is on the outside. You're going to tell him to do it outside. This is what we typically do. This is what we do the most. If we now want to go to, so no compensation means it's going to cut directly on that line, which is shown by this. So it's on the center. So this kind of is a visual too of what it is. So this is what it looks like when it's no compensation, that this bit is going to follow directly on that line. So now inside compensation is when you want to cut on the inside. You do this when, I do this a lot when I'm doing holes and stuff like that, but not, or when you have to do the inside of letters. So like you can have two different layers too. Like, so if you need one to be inside, one to be outside. So like, for example, this might actually be a good visual. Let's make this bigger because it's going to be a lot bigger to work. So this is actually probably a good. I'm gonna do the same thing. This might actually be confusing, but I think it's kind of important, so I think we should do it. So I'm ungrouping this so that I'm going to treat these two parts differently. You shouldn't have to build anything this complicated while I'm gone, but okay, so this is going to be our inside. So let's do them like this. We're going to swap them. So what I just did is I made it to stroke instead of fill. So like this would be an example of when I would do, let's make them all 17. Right, so this is going to be inside. So then just think about where the bit has to be. So this has to be on the outside, right? So this would be mill inside. So mill inside, we would move down to here, and then this would remain on the outside. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm going to try to show that a little bit better too. So okay, so when we're on the inside of an A, we want it to cut the inside. So then we're going to have our bit follow the inside of that line, right? But then we need for the outside for it to cut the outside, right? So we want the bit to be on the outside of the letter. So that's, they look the same, but they're not the same. Do you see how this is on the inside of the shape? And that is on the bit is on the outside of that shape. That is what we mean when we talk about inside and outside compensation. So when running this on the apex, we would need to run them as two separate layers. So we would run the inside by itself, right? So that's the inside. We're just looking at the A right now. The inside compensation, and then the outside compensation. So that we run in two separate layers. So that way, if we have a whole word, it will do all the insides first. Then it'll come back and do all the outsides. You know? Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And before I forget, I try to do that right away so that. All right. So zoom in. Okay, so that was kind of a crash course on when to do what. But visually, I will make my stroke go on the inside or outside to tell me where it should go so I can visually see it and space it. I'm not going to get into trying to fill the whole sheet, but actually, no, we're not going to do that right now. That's too much. Okay, so this file is ready, and where the black is, let's just make it something. Okay, so okay, so we're gonna make it purple just so it doesn't look like it's a border or something, right? So then, because I want this to kind of stay in this place, I'm going to touch this top corner arrow because I'm going to make the artboard grow from this top left corner. And I want my width to be 48 by 96. So I was able to just make my substrate size without having to recenter anything. I kept that stayed in the same place, if that makes sense. These 9 squares you gotta pay attention to a lot. Okay, so now for nesting, I'm going to kind of move them where we need them. I also like to keep things different colors. Like I'm probably gonna make these holes something else too. So that way later on I can group them while I'm working, but then I'm able to, like right now I just made them green, and then my mill is purple, right? Because it helps when I'm moving them around on the board for them to be grouped, but I like to easily make it so that they'll that I can put them back where they need to be. Because you see how right now I'm selecting all of them, but as soon as I hit group, they all become one again. So it just helps me organize the way that I think. Okay, so let's say I need 3 of them instead of me just doing them right next to each other, like would seem like it makes sense. Where the purple is would hit, right? So we have to be mindful of that, and usually give a group some space in between. What we were trying to do the other day was to see if we could just have this middle bit land where it is, but sometimes there's a lot more to that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to just show the more simple way. right? So right now we're leaving this gap, so the bit's going to follow the purple line. And then, so we can, I'm just going to do this way. So I'm going to grab the whole thing. I'm holding Shift and Alt at the same time to do a duplicate, and then D. And then we'll Control D, and then I'm going to pull this down, doing the same thing. So I grabbed all three and did it, and then, right. So let's say we need a bunch of these signs, right? But we don't need the full sheet, but let's just, for argument's sake, Control D, D, right? So that's how many we need. And that's the amount of space that we're going to take up for it, right? So then what I like to do is, okay, so the artboard is showing a full 4x8 sheet. But I don't need that much, so I'm not going to make my art file, everywhere that the artboard is what's going to print. So if I'm making this for the Canon, I'm going to make it kind of close to what I need. So in case he can run more, or in case the production person can run more than one file on a sheet of that, this way it's only going to print what we need, if that makes sense, and it'll align. I'm sorry, there's just so much to have to think about, so it's hard to explain it all in one go. So I just made the artboard smaller so it's closer to around our artwork, but this can still print on an 8.5 by, or on a 4x8. I'm going to select everything, I'm going to group everything, and then I'm going to completely center it on the board. This is a very important step because when everything's centered and flipped and all sorts of stuff, it just helps for everything to be centered, because we have more of a chance that it's easier to work backwards if we need to later on. So, all right. So let's get into registration marks. So for registration, okay, so what I did is I grabbed the circle, and we're going to make that so that it is the size of our bit. Our bit is 6 millimeters. So 6 mm, you just type that right in here, 6 mm, and then it's going to make us a little circle that is that size. Right, so we're going to make that black because it's just always black. Okay, so there's our first one. We don't want it too close to the edge, but we also don't want it in our artwork, right, because that would be bad, because it is going to print. So I usually put it kind of around here, and I do my second one, and I lock that one. I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this one. I'm holding Shift while I'm moving it, and then I'm grabbing the first dot, and then I am grouping these, Control G. So now they live together, and then I'm able to just grab them both at the same time, and then I made it a copy, dupe, right? So now this bottom two, so these are grouped in twos, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So drag this to where I want at the bottom. That looks good. So now I can just select everything, because I'm going to lock everything except for these crop marks, right? So Control A. Oh, they're still on that layer. I apologize. So let me just grab them all. And then see, I just move them onto the CCD layer. CCD just means registration. So now I can lock everything else, right? So I want the spacing of these to be consistent. See how they're currently not? So I can, even if I had it like that and literally just did the top, bottom, and then dropped a couple in the middle, that's fine. I can select all of these, go to the Align tool, and then Distribute, and hit it, and it will distribute them evenly. make sure that this one is selected. This is where it'll work. It'll distribute to what you have selected. If you hit artboard, it'll do something different. So it's going to space it to the edge of the artboard. See what I mean? So it's making it so it kisses the end. We don't want that. So make sure that this is selected before hitting that. And if you accidentally see it do that, you know that that's what that was. So just Control Z, swipe or switch, and then hit that. Okay. So that should be good, except for I think we still have this guy right here. We can now unlock him. And he can go back with his friends. So now, all right, so let's show all of our layers. Well, our layers aren't working yet because remember we put them all in one. So we gotta separate them back out again. Okay. So just to show that this worked, see how they appear and disappear. That's a quick and easy way to check, is to go to wireframe. Oh, and when you see stuff like this, that means that if I were to put this on the Summa, it would cut just like this, right? For printing, it doesn't really matter. But just for the sake of clarity, let's go ahead and we're going to select everything that is that color, and then we're going to merge them. The way we merge them is go here and then here, right? So they're all, see how it looks nice and clean and normal. Okay. So now back to layers, because right now, like, everything's still in this one, right? So let's grab everything that's purple. So I have my actions over here, which we should probably load these into yours, but just didn't want to overload you yet. But the other way to do that is select same stroke color. That's why I made them different colors earlier, to try to think ahead, right? So this actually stays here, so we can lock it. So now we're going to grab everything that's green, that's filled with green. Oh, that's something important too. So we just went to, sorry, I'm going too fast. Okay, so I just selected just the dot, but you see how it has a stroke on it? So we can't have that. So select same, fill, and then turn that off, and then put it on the layer that needs to go. So if you look down here at the layers palette, we're going to drag holes back onto their own layer, and then we can just lock these two, lock off all of them actually, and then we can just do Control A. Just kidding, we can't do that. Oh, actually we can Control A because we locked our purple shapes. Sorry, this part's confusing. You're just trying to separate your layers so that they're on the right layers. So you can copy paste. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. So sorry about that. That was probably confusing. So we have our artwork. Oh, it actually didn't. Huh. I thought I locked it. That's okay. So we're just going to select the same stroke. And then we're going to put it back. Okay, so now our layer should be good. So we have our CDC, or our CCD. Let's just zoom out a little bit so we can see all our crops, or at least some of them. Okay, so let's turn that off. And the mill should disappear. Then the hole should disappear. Then the artwork should disappear, right? So assuming that worked. So this also kind of makes it so that you can this file is now your file to do everything. So you can now use your Apex. You can now so once it's like this, I save this as I always create a folder. That's production, and then we're gonna save underscore pre-flight, because that way this file you can always come back to and use it, right? So now I'm going to save my Canon file So for the CANON file, we don't want to see the holes or the mill, so we turn them off. A lot of times I also like to, for Jeremy, I like to put, so let's turn it back on so I don't, because my file name is always going to be this, and then the extension, or well, it's not extension, but like the last word in the file name. And then I usually like to change it to our font. And then I flip it around because this is the corner. The reason that we put 2 here is for alignment. So that way, registration, or just honestly, so that way he knows which direction is which, so he can orient it. So if he needs to rotate it, he knows that when there's 2 corners, that this is that corner. So that's the only purpose of the dots. Okay, so this is going to live on the artwork layer. So we just drag it to there. So see how when we turn off artwork, that goes there. So that way it'll print, because we want it to print, but we don't need it anywhere else. Okay. So back to saving files. All right. So we only want to see. We need to keep the CDC on, right? And then we also need to keep the artwork on and the file name. So then we're gonna hit Control-Shift-S, or you can just hit Save As. Here, let's do it that way. File, Save As, so that way we can keep renaming whenever we need, right? So whenever we go to print, it's always going to be a PDF. For all the machines, printing is PDF. Printing, PDF, PP, right? So, but I'm going to label this CANON because that's the machine it's going to print on. So we're going to hit save. So you can usually leave your settings what they are. It's either usually default or whatever they are, so that should be fine. So now we're just basically taking our pre-float file and saving them as different files. So now we're going to do the Apex file. So we're deleting all of our artwork because we don't need that. But remember, we still have our pre-float file, so we can always go backwards. These, you need to turn these back on. So we should have, I'll put it in a wireframe so you can see. We have our holes, we have our outside of our signs, our mill, we have everything. Okay, so, and you can leave it just like this and it works just fine, just as long as everything doesn't have multiple, these are locked. So, okay, so as long as it's not both, as long as nothing has both fill and stroke, everything has to just be fill or stroke, right? So like purple is stroke, black is fill. Let me unlock them so I can show you. Right? And then that's only, as long as you have one or the other, we're good, okay? So this is our file for the Apex. So it needs the CDC to read it, and it needs these to follow it. This is where for holes, he typically does drill mode, but I always put inside comp because I would rather him do inside comp mill than outside. And let me show you why. So this represents outside. So right now, it being filled represents inside, right? So let's switch back to this so it's not confusing, right? So we're going to do it as a stroke. So 17, right? Okay. So taking this, we can turn this, so right now, this is inside comp, right? This is what it'll do if he does no compensation. This is what it does when he does outside compensation. That's a visual way to show, right? So that's why I always put inside compensation, because I'd rather it go smaller than no compensation or outside compensation, right? So like right now, that would be a half-inch hole instead of a 6mm hole. So let's go back. Okay, so now we're going to save this. Well, we don't save it, we actually export it. So we go to File, Export As, and it always has to be a DXF file. And then we change this to Apex, and then export.